My name is Chris, and about 20 years ago, in the dead of winter in the Chicago suburbs, I turned my family's parking lot into a frozen hell for a bunch of entitled trespassers who thought they could park wherever they wanted. But what started as a minor annoyance escalated into a New Year's Eve revenge that left them slipping, sliding, and screaming in frustration, and me smiling from ear to ear. If you've ever dealt with rude neighbors or strangers who disrespect your property and dreamed of getting even in the most poetic way possible, hit that like button right now, subscribe for more stories like this, and let's dive into how I served up justice on ice. Picture this. It's the early 2000s, and my family owns 2 3-flat apartment buildings right in the heart of a dense Chicago suburb. These buildings line both sides of the street for about a mile, row after row of identical units, most with barely enough space for a patch of grass, let alone parking. But we were lucky. Our property was bigger because it doubled as our home. We lived in 2 of the units and rented out the other 4. That extra land meant we had a spacious parking lot that could fit around 16 cars comfortably. It was a godsend in a neighborhood where street parking was a blood sport, and side streets were crammed with houses and even less space. For decades, everything ran smoothly. Our tenants were respectful, and the lot was strictly for them and us. No issues, no drama. We maintained it well, shoveled snow in winter, mowed the grass in summer. It felt like our little oasis in the urban squeeze. Then slowly, things started to change. I'd come home after a long day at work, muscles aching from my construction job, only to find some random sedan squeezed into a spot that wasn't theirs. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe a visitor who got lost. But it kept happening. More cars more often. These weren't our tenants. They were strangers from down the block, treating our lot like a free public garage because their own buildings didn't have enough spaces. I remember one evening vividly. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the asphalt, and there was this beat-up old truck parked right in my usual spot. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I pulled up. Who does this? I thought, my jaw clenching. I decided enough was enough. I parked my car behind it, blocking it in completely. Let them wait for me to move. Not long after, this guy storms out. Let's call him the bush basher, because that's what he became. He was in his late 30s, scruffy beard, wearing a faded hoodie that smelled like stale cigarettes even from a distance. He bangs on my window, face red and twisted. "Move your damn car," he yells, spittle flying. I roll down the window just a crack, keeping my voice calm but firm. "This is private property. You're trespassing. Move yours first." He curses under his breath, eyes narrowing like he was sizing me up. Then without a word he jumps back in his truck, revs the engine, and I kid you not, drives straight through our neatly trimmed bushes, tires churning up mud and grass, ripping across the yard to escape. Branches snapped like brittle bones, and the ground was left scarred with deep ruts. I stood there, mouth agape, feeling a hot surge of anger bubble up from my chest. That was our home he just vandalized. Our sanctuary. I called the cops right away, heart pounding as I explained what happened. They showed up, took a report, but shrugged it off. Nothing we can do without catching him in the act. One officer said, notepad flipping shut. It felt like a punch to the gut. Powerless, disregarded. So I took matters into my own hands. I contacted a local tow company and had them install big, bold signs all over the lot. Private parking. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. We had to call them each time, but the signs worked like a charm. The random cars vanished. Peace restored. Or so I thought. Fast forward to that fateful New Year's Eve. The air was biting cold, below zero, the kind of freeze that seeps into your bones and makes your breath hang like fog. I'd been out running errands, picking up snacks and drinks for a quiet family celebration at home. As I turned onto our street, my headlights swept over a scene that made my blood boil. Every single spot in our lot was taken. Not just taken, overflowing. Cars jammed in haphazardly, some double-parked, others spilling onto the street, blocking each other in. It looked like a chaotic puzzle no one could solve. I slammed on the brakes, my truck jolting to a stop. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, a mix of fury and disbelief washing over me. This wasn't just inconvenient. It was a blatant invasion. On New Year's Eve of all nights, when families should be cozy inside, not fighting for their own damn parking. I scanned the plates. None were familiar. These were outsiders, probably partying at some nearby apartment. I pulled over to the curb, engine idling, and dialed the tow company. My voice was tight-clipped. The lot's full of unauthorized cars. I need them gone. But the dispatcher sighed on the other end. We're slammed tonight, sir. Parties, accidents. It'll be a few hours at least. A few hours? In this cold? I'd have to park blocks away and trek back, exposed to the wind that howled like a beast. That's when the idea hit me, sharp and brilliant, like a spark in the dark. I glanced at the garage, remembering the lawn sprinklers and hoses we stored for summer. It was below zero out there. Water would freeze in minutes. A slow grin spread across my face as the plan formed. This wasn't just revenge, it was poetic justice. They'd parked on my turf? I'd make sure they couldn't leave it. I hurried inside. The warmth of the house a brief comfort against the rage simmering inside. My family was gathered in the living room, the TV flickering with pre-midnight festivities. What's wrong? My wife asked, seeing my flushed face. I explained quickly, and her eyes widened. But she didn't stop me. She knew that look. I was determined. Digging through the garage, I pulled out 3 sprinklers and long hoses, my breath puffing in the cold air. I ran one hose inside to the laundry room faucet, twisting it onto the hot water tap. Smart move. The hot water would keep the hose and sprinklers from freezing up, but once it hit the icy ground in cars, it'd turn to solid ice in no time. I positioned the first sprinkler in the lot, aimed at the cluster of cars and turned it on. Water arched out, steaming slightly in the frigid air before splattering across hoods, windshields, and pavement. The sound was almost musical, a soft patter turning to crackles as ice formed. I moved methodically, every half hour or so, repositioning the sprinklers to cover every inch. Water seeped into grills, freezing the engines solid. I sprayed directly into door locks, watching beads form and harden like tiny diamonds between window seals and glass, ensuring they'd be pried apart only with effort. The street by the parked cars got the treatment too, turning the whole area into a glassy rink. For almost 5 hours, I worked in the biting cold, my fingers numb despite gloves, but fueled by that burning sense of righteousness. The lot glistened under the streetlights, a frozen masterpiece. Cars encased in thick layers of ice, tires locked to the ground. It was beautiful in a vengeful way, nature and ingenuity teaming up against the intruders. Finally, satisfied, I coiled the hoses, stored the sprinklers, and slipped inside. The house was quiet, family asleep. I climbed into bed, the adrenaline fading into a smug contentment. Sleep came easy. Then around 4 a.m., it started. Furious pounding on the doors, doorbells ringing like alarms. Shouts echoed outside, angry, desperate voices cutting through the night. I lay there for a moment, letting it sink in, a chuckle building in my throat. My wife stirred, smiling sleepily. "Let them pound," she whispered. But we called the cops anyway, just to cover our bases. We waited until the sirens approached, blue lights flashing against the windows. Then we stepped outside, bundled in coats, into the chaos. A group of about a dozen people huddled in the lot, slipping on the ice, faces contorted in rage and confusion. "What the hell happened?" one guy yelled, kicking at his frozen tire. A woman pried at her door handle, but it was sealed shut. They looked miserable, hungover, cold, and now trapped. The cops pulled up, 2 officers stepping out with flashlights. They took one look at the scene, cars like ice sculptures, people flailing, and I swear, their shoulders shook with suppressed laughter. One officer's mouth twitched as he asked, "What's going on here?" These people pointed at me, accusations flying. "He did this. Froze our cars." But I stayed calm, arms crossed. "This is private property," I said, voice steady. "Look at the signs. They were told to park here by their friend. The same guy who drove over our bushes last time." I recognized the bush basher in the crowd, his face paling as eyes turned to him. The officers nodded, inspecting the signs. In our town, they could ticket on private property with permission. "Go ahead," I said. They started writing tickets, one for each car. Parking violations stacking up. The group groaned, protests turning to pleas. "We can't even get in," one whined. That's why we're towing them.